My name is Michael Thornton. I'm 54 years old. I've been hunting since I was 7. My father taught me how to shoot before he taught me how to read. I grew up in the forests of northern Montana, spent more time in the wilderness than in civilization. In my life, I've taken hundreds of deer, dozens of elk, bears, mountain goats. I know these woods like the back of my hand. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying this so you understand. I'm not a rookie. I'm not some city idiot with a Walmart rifle who mistakes a deer for a cow. I'm a professional, or I was. What happened 6 years ago in October 2018 changed me forever. I still hunt. It's the only thing I know how to do, the only way to feed my family. But now I'm afraid. Every time I enter the woods, I feel them. They're watching. They remember. I want to tell this story because 6 years of silence is driving me insane. My wife thinks I have PTSD. My doctor prescribes me antidepressants. My friends stopped inviting me hunting because I've become paranoid. But I'm not crazy. What happened was real, and it's still happening. Let me start at the beginning. Let me tell you about the day I killed something I shouldn't have, and how that single moment destroyed everything I thought I knew about the world. I need you to understand what hunting meant to me, not just as a job, but as an identity, as a way of life that connected me to my father, my grandfather, generations of men in my family who lived off the land. My father, Robert Thornton, was a legend in these parts. He worked as a hunting guide for 40 years, took clients from all over the world into the Montana wilderness. Governors, senators, movie stars, oil tycoons, they all wanted Bob Thornton to guide their hunts. Not because he guaranteed a kill, but because he understood the animals, respected them. He taught me that hunting wasn't about dominance or sport. It was about being part of the natural cycle. Predator and prey, life and death, the old feeding the young. He taught me to never take more than I needed, to use every part of what I killed, to thank the animal for its sacrifice. A good hunter, he told me when I was 12, holding my first rifle, knows that every shot is a contract. You're promising that animal a quick, clean death. No suffering. You owe them that much. I took that lesson seriously. In 35 years of hunting, I'd never taken a shot I wasn't confident about, never wounded an animal I couldn't track down, never wasted meat. I was proud of that record. My father died in 2015, massive heart attack while field dressing an elk. He was 71, died doing what he loved, in the woods, with blood on his hands and the mountain wind in his face, the way he would have wanted. After he died, I took over his guiding business. It was struggling. The economy had changed, fewer people wanted to pay premium prices for guided hunts, and the game populations were declining due to drought and development. But I was determined to keep it going. It was his legacy, my legacy. By 2018, I was barely breaking even. My wife, Sarah, worked as a nurse at the local hospital, which paid most of our bills. The guiding business brought in just enough to cover property taxes and keep food on the table. We had a daughter, Emma, who'd just started college at University of Montana. Student loans were crushing us. I needed a good season, needed those high-paying clients, needed successful hunts, needed word-of-mouth recommendations, needed to prove I was as good as my father. That pressure, that desperation to succeed, I think it made me careless, made me see what I wanted to see instead of what was actually there. I'd been preparing for the October 2018 elk season since July. There's a particular area in the Bitterroot Mountains, about 20 miles from my house, that's always been prime elk habitat. Thick pine forests, high meadows, natural mineral licks. My father showed me this spot when I was 15, told me to keep it secret. Places like this, he said, you don't share. not with clients, not with friends. This is our church. You treat it with respect. I'd been hiking into that area once a week all summer, checking trail cameras, looking for sign. And I'd found him, a massive bull elk, at least 12 points, maybe 14, one of the biggest I'd ever seen. The trail cameras caught him multiple times, always around dawn, moving through the same corridor from his bedding area to his feeding grounds. I studied that elk like a college professor studies a thesis, learned his patterns, his routes, his behavior, where he bedded during the day, where he fed at night, where he went when the wind changed. I spent hours just watching, not hunting, just observing. By October, I knew that elk better than I knew my own neighbors. I could predict within 15 minutes when he'd move through certain areas. I knew which trails he preferred, which clearings he avoided, how he reacted to pressure. I'd showed the trail camera photos to a few potential clients. One of them, a wealthy real estate developer from Texas named Jim Crawford, got excited. Offered me $8,000 for a guaranteed opportunity at an elk that size. Not a guaranteed kill, I never promised that, but a guaranteed good opportunity. $8,000. That was mortgage payments for 6 months. That was Emma's tuition for a semester. That was the difference between keeping the business afloat and losing everything my father built. I took the booking, scheduled it for October 15th, opening day of elk season. I'd guide Crawford to the spot, set him up before dawn, and give him first chance at the big bull. But 3 days before the hunt, Crawford called to cancel. Family emergency, had to fly back to Texas, offered to pay a $2,000 cancellation fee, keep the rest for a rescheduled hunt later in the season. I should have taken it, should have just accepted the cancellation fee, written off the hunt, tried again later. But I didn't, because I'd been watching that bull for months, because I knew exactly where he'd be on opening morning, because that was thousands of dollars worth of meat walking around on 4 legs, and we needed it. I decided to take the elk myself, fill our freezers for winter, maybe sell some of the meat to offset the lost booking. Not illegal. I had a valid elk tag, completely within the rules. But my father would have disapproved. He always said you should never hunt when you're desperate. Desperation makes you careless, makes you take shots you shouldn't take. He was right. I woke up at 3:00 a.m. Sarah was working the night shift at the hospital, wouldn't be home until 7:00 a.m. The house was empty, quiet except for the tick of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. I'd packed everything the night before. Remington 700 in 30-06, my father's rifle actually, the one he'd used for 40 years. Loophole VX3, 4.5 14x40 scope. 4 rounds of hand-loaded ammunition, 180-grain Nosler partition bullets, IMR 4350 powder, carefully weighed and tested at the range. Those rounds would group within an inch at 200 yards. Precision ammunition for a precision shot. I dressed in layers: merino wool base layer, fleece mid-layer, Gore-Tex outer layer in mossy oak camo pattern. Good boots, broken in, waterproofed. Day pack with water, emergency supplies, game bags, knife, rope. Everything I needed for a successful hunt and meat recovery. The drive to the trailhead took 45 minutes. Dark country roads, no other traffic at that hour, just me and the truck headlights cutting through the October darkness. I remember that drive clearly. The radio was off. I was going through the shot sequence in my mind, visualizing everything, the approach to the ridge, the setup, the sight picture, the trigger press. I'd made this shot in my mind 100 times. I parked at the Forest Service trailhead at 4:15 a.m. Temperature was 34 degrees, wind light from the northwest. Perfect. The wind would carry my scent away from where the elk would approach. The hike-in was 4 miles, gaining about 1,500 feet in elevation. I'd done it dozens of times, knew every switchback, every landmark. In the darkness, with just my headlamp, it took me about 90 minutes. I reached my chosen spot at 5:45 a.m., a small rocky outcrop on a ridge overlooking a meadow about 300 yards away. Natural rest for the rifle, good field of view, multiple escape routes if needed. Perfect sniper position, my father would have called it. I set up in the darkness, laid out my shooting mat, set up my bipod, ranged various landmarks in the meadow below. The big pine tree was 287 yards. The lightning-struck snag was 312 yards. The boulder at the meadow's edge was 278 yards. I knew those distances cold. At those ranges, with my rifle and ammunition, the bullet would drop about 8 inches below point of aim. I'd compensate by aiming slightly high on the target, standard long-range shooting technique. I loaded the rifle. 4 rounds in the internal magazine, 1 in the chamber, safety on. Then I waited. This is what non-hunters don't understand about hunting. It's mostly waiting, sitting still, being quiet, becoming part of the landscape, letting the forest forget you're there. As dawn approached, the forest started waking up. Birds calling, squirrels moving through the trees, a coyote yipping in the distance. The temperature dropped a few more degrees, always coldest right before sunrise. My breath came out in small clouds. The sun started to break over the eastern peaks at 7:02 a.m. That golden light, low angle, illuminating the mist rising from the meadow. It was beautiful. The kind of morning that makes you believe in God, or at least in something bigger than yourself. At 7:14 a.m. I saw movement at the tree line. Through the scope at 12x magnification, I could see what I was certain was the bull elk I'd been tracking. The antlers were clearly visible, massive, catching the early light. The body was huge, moving slowly through the trees at the meadow's edge. But something felt wrong. I can't explain it better than that. Just a feeling. A tiny voice in the back of my mind saying, "Wait, look closer, something's not right." I should have listened to that voice. My father taught me to always trust that instinct. If something feels wrong, he'd say, it probably is. Don't take the shot. But I'd been planning this for months. I'd invested hundreds of hours. We needed this meat. This was my elk. I told that voice to shut up. The animal stepped into a clearing, about 280 yards out. Broadside presentation. Perfect. I could see what I thought was the shoulder, the vital zone, exactly where I needed to place the shot. I settled the crosshairs behind the front shoulder, controlled my breathing. In, out, halfway, exhale, hold. The valley was absolutely silent. No wind, no birds, nothing. Just me and the target and the space between. I started my trigger press. Smooth, steady, straight back. The rifle has a 3-pound trigger, tuned perfectly. I knew exactly when it would break. At the very last millisecond before the rifle fired, that voice screamed at me one more time. Stop. But my finger had already passed the point of no return. The trigger broke. The rifle fired. The recoil pushed the scope off target for a fraction of a second. When I reacquired the sight picture, the animal was down, completely down. Didn't even try to run. That usually means a perfect heart-lung shot. Instant drop. I worked the bolt, chambered another round, kept the scope on target. Standard procedure. Sometimes animals go down and get back up. You need to be ready for a follow-up shot. But this one didn't move. Through the scope, I could see it was down for good. I waited the standard 5 minutes, counted them. 300 seconds. Let my heart rate come down. Let the adrenaline settle. Let the animal expire fully if it wasn't already dead. At 5 minutes, I safed the rifle, slung it, and started the hike down to the kill site. The descent from my position to the meadow took about 15 minutes. Steep terrain, loose rocks, had to move carefully. The whole way down, I was running numbers in my head. How much meat, how to pack it out, how many trips it would take, where I'd hang it to age. A mature bull elk that size would yield maybe 250, 300 pounds of meat. Quarters in the freezer, backstraps, tenderloins, neck roasts, stew meat. Enough to feed us for a year if we were careful. But as I got closer to the meadow, that wrong feeling came back, stronger. The forest was too quiet. After a gunshot, you usually hear ravens within minutes. They know that sound means food. Crows, magpies, camp robbers, they all respond to gunshots. But there was nothing. Complete silence. The wind had died completely. The morning mist, which should have been burning off, was actually getting thicker. The temperature felt like it had dropped 10 degrees, and there was a smell, faint at first, but getting stronger as I approached. Not the smell of elk, not the copper smell of blood or the musk of a rutting bull. Something else, something I'd never smelled before. I unsung my rifle, chambered a round, clicked off the safety. Something was wrong. Maybe a bear had already claimed the kill. Maybe a mountain lion. Predators can be on a downed animal incredibly fast. I approached the clearing slowly, rifle at low ready, finger on the trigger guard. And then I saw it. It wasn't an elk. The shape was wrong. The size was wrong. Everything was wrong. Lying in the grass, bleeding from a perfect chest shot, was something I'd never seen before, something that shouldn't exist. It was massive, 7.5 feet tall at least, maybe 8. Had to weigh 600, maybe 700 pounds. Covered in hair, not fur, hair, reddish-brown, sparse in places, thick in others. The coverage was all wrong for any animal I knew. But it was the body structure that made my brain refuse to process what I was seeing. It wasn't a bear. Bears are quadrupeds, even when they stand up. This was a biped, 2 legs, 2 arms. The proportions were humanoid, but wrong. The arms were too long, too muscular. The legs were too thick, bent at angles that weren't quite human, weren't quite ape. The hands. God, the hands. They had fingers. Long fingers with what looked like fingernails, not claws. The fingers were curled slightly, and I could see calluses on the palms. Tool-using hands, working hands, and the feet. Enormous feet, easily 18 inches long, but with 5 toes. Human arrangement, not hooves, not paws. Feet. My shot had hit it perfectly. Center chest, where the heart and lungs would be. The entry wound was exactly where it should be for an elk. But this wasn't an elk. It was still alive, dying but alive. As I stood there, frozen in horror, it turned its head toward me. I've thought about that face every single day for 6 years. I see it when I close my eyes. I see it in my nightmares. I'll see it until the day I die. The skull structure was massive. Heavy brow ridge, pronounced sagittal crest running down the center of the skull, massive jaw. Ape-like, but not quite. The proportions were different from any primate I'd seen in zoos or documentaries. But it was the expression that destroyed me. The eyes were brown, deep brown, almost black, and they were looking right at me with complete awareness. Not the glassy, fading stare of a dying animal, the focused, understanding gaze of a dying person. The creature's mouth was open slightly, blood bubbling from its lips with each breath. The breathing was labored, wet, gurgling. Lung shot. I'd destroyed the lungs. It was drowning in its own blood. But it wasn't panicking, it was just looking at me, studying me. The eyes moved across my face, my body, my rifle, my clothes, taking in every detail. It was memorizing me. And then I saw something that made my knees weak. The creature's right hand moved slightly, trembling, and touched the entry wound on its chest. The fingers probed the hole carefully, gently, then came away bloody. It looked at the blood on its fingers, then looked at me again. And I saw understanding in those eyes. Perfect, complete understanding. It knew what had happened. It knew I had shot it. It knew it was dying because of what I'd done. The creature's mouth moved. The jaw worked like it was trying to form words. A sound came out, low and broken. Woo! It was trying to ask why. Oh, God! It was trying to speak. I stumbled backward, nearly fell. My rifle was still in my hands, but I couldn't think, couldn't process what I was seeing. The creature made another sound, this time not trying to speak, just a vocalization. It started low, almost like a groan, but then rose in pitch and volume. It was screaming. I've heard elk bugles that shake your bones. I've heard mountain lions scream like women being murdered. I've heard grizzly bears roar. This was different from all of them. It sounded human. Not exactly human. The vocal structure was different. The pitch range was different. But it was close enough to human that my brain recognized it as a person screaming in agony. The sound echoed off the mountains, seemed to go on forever. The creature's chest heaved with each scream, pushing more blood from the wound, from its mouth. And then, from multiple points in the forest around me, came answering calls. They were different from the dying creature's scream. Lower, more controlled, but unmistakably similar. Same vocal pattern, same structure, like different members of a family, all having similar voices but distinct. I counted at least 6 different calls, coming from different directions, north, northeast, east, south, surrounding me. The dying creature on the ground screamed again, weaker this time. The blood loss was catastrophic. It wouldn't survive more than a few minutes. Its eyes never left me. Even as it screamed, even as it bled out, it kept staring, memorizing. The forest around me was alive with sound now, not just vocalizations, but movement, heavy footsteps, branches breaking, something big, multiple big somethings, moving through the trees toward the clearing. They were coming. I had maybe 30 seconds before they arrived. My rifle held 4 more rounds. Part of my brain, the part trained for survival, was calculating angles, sight lines, defensive positions. But a larger part of my brain was screaming at me, "You killed someone. You killed a person, and their family is coming." The creature on the ground made one more sound, not a scream this time, softer, almost like it was calling to someone. And they answered. One voice, louder and closer than the others, coming fast. I should have run, should have sprinted for the tree line headed for my truck, gotten out of there. But I couldn't move. I was locked in place, watching the light fade from the creature's eyes, watching its chest stop heaving, watching death take someone I'd killed. The creature's hand fell away from the wound. The fingers uncurled slowly. The eyes stayed open, but the awareness behind them dimmed, faded, went out. It was dead. And that's when they emerged from the forest. They came out of the mist like ghosts. The first one I saw was enormous, 9 feet tall, maybe more, shoulders as wide as I am tall, covered in dark brown hair, almost black in places. Female, I realized, the body shape, the facial structure, slightly different from the one I'd killed. She came straight toward the body, didn't run, didn't charge, just walked with terrible purpose. Her eyes found the corpse, and something in her posture broke. She made a sound, low, keening, full of anguish, a mother's cry. She walked right past me. I was maybe 15 feet away, rifle in my hands, finger on the trigger. She could have attacked me, could have killed me easily. But she didn't even look at me. All her attention was on the body. She knelt down beside it, and the movement was heartbreakingly gentle. Her massive hands reached out and touched the creature's face, cradled its head. She made that sound again, softer this time, speaking to her dead child. The others came then, 8 of them total, various sizes, adults, juveniles, one that looked very young, maybe only 4 feet tall. They formed a circle around the body and the mother. They were protecting them, creating a barrier. None of them looked at me. They knew I was there. Their heads would turn slightly in my direction, nostrils flaring as they scented me. But they didn't acknowledge me. I wasn't important, not yet. The dead family member was all that mattered. One of the juveniles, maybe 6 feet tall, started to move toward me. It was baring its teeth, hands forming fists. It wanted revenge. The mother made a sharp barking sound without looking up. The juvenile froze, then backed away, rejoined the circle. The mother's authority was absolute. I realized I was watching something, private, something sacred, a family's grief. The mother was still holding the dead creature's head, rocking slightly, making soft vocalizations, mourning sounds. The others in the circle joined in, creating a chorus of grief that made my chest tight. One of the adults, male, massive, scars across his chest and arms, bent down and picked up the dead creature's hand, held it gently. His head was bowed. They were saying goodbye. I don't know how long I stood there watching. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been 20. Time felt strange. Everything felt strange. Finally, the mother raised her head. Her face was wet. They could cry. They had tear ducts, and they could cry. She looked at me then, made eye contact, held it. I've been stared at by grizzly bears sizing me up for attack. I've been in close proximity to mountain lions, wolves, aggressive elk bulls. But I'd never felt anything like this. Her eyes were dark brown, almost black, and they were looking at me with perfect human intelligence, not animal awareness, human understanding. She knew exactly what had happened. She knew I had mistaken her child for an animal and killed it. She knew it was an accident in one sense. I hadn't meant to kill a person, but she also knew I'd been careless, impatient, greedy. She knew me, and she was making sure I knew she knew. The stare lasted at least 30 seconds, long enough for me to see her face in perfect detail, the scars on her brow, the silver in her hair around the temples, the lines around her eyes. She was old, older than me, probably, and she'd just lost a child. Then she looked away, back down at the body. She made a soft grunt, and 3 of the adults moved in. They were going to carry the body. The way they lifted it, I'll never forget that, so gentle, like they were handling something infinitely precious and fragile. The mother supported the head. The 2 adults took the torso and legs. They lifted together, synchronized, careful. One of the juveniles picked something up from the grass, a stick or branch the dead one must have been carrying. It was kept, a possession, something to remember. They formed a procession, the mother in front, carrying the head, the 2 adults with the body, the others following. The youngest stayed in the middle of the group, protected. As they walked toward the tree line, some of them looked back at me. Not threatening, just looking, making sure they saw my face, my height, my build, my rifle, my clothes. They were memorizing me, too. The mother was the last to look back. Just before they disappeared into the forest, she stopped, turned, made eye contact one final time. Her expression didn't change, but she made a sound, low, rumbling, from deep in her chest. Not a threat, a promise. I know what you look like. I will never forget. We will never forget. Then they were gone. disappeared into the forest like they'd never been there. I was alone in the clearing, just me and a pool of blood soaking into the grass. I don't remember much about getting back to my truck. I know I ran most of the 4 miles. I know I fell at least twice, scraped my hands, tore my pants on rocks. I know my chest was burning, my legs were screaming, but I couldn't stop. When I reached the truck, I threw the rifle in the back, climbed in, locked all the doors, sat there shaking, gasping, trying to understand what had just happened. My hands were trembling so hard I dropped the keys 3 times trying to start the engine. When it finally turned over, I just sat there, engine running, staring at the forest. Part of me was waiting for them to come out of the trees, to surround the truck, to finish what I'd started. But they didn't come. The forest was silent. I looked at my watch. 8:47 a.m. The whole thing had taken less than 90 minutes. 90 minutes to destroy my entire understanding of reality. I drove home in a daze. Didn't remember the drive at all. 1 minute I was at the trailhead, the next I was pulling into my driveway. Sarah's car was there. She was home from her shift. I sat in the truck for a long time, trying to compose myself, trying to figure out what to tell her, trying to figure out what to tell anyone. How do you explain that you killed a Bigfoot, that you shot someone's child thinking it was an elk, that you looked into a dying creature's eyes and saw a person looking back? You don't, because nobody would believe you. They'd think you were crazy, or lying, or both. I cleaned up as best I could in the truck, wiped the blood off my hands. I didn't even remember touching the body, but I must have. Straightened my clothes, controlled my breathing. Then I went inside. Sarah was in the kitchen making coffee. She looked tired, night shifts always exhausted her, but she smiled when she saw me. "How'd it go? Get your elk?" I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. "No," I finally said. "Didn't see anything. Wrong day, I guess." She nodded, sympathetic. "Sorry, honey, you spent so much time preparing. Maybe next weekend?" "Yeah, maybe." I went upstairs, told her I was tired, needed to rest, locked myself in the bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed and put my head in my hands, and I cried. For the first time since my father's funeral, I cried, sobbed like a child, shoulders shaking, barely able to breathe. I'd killed someone. Not something, someone. Someone with a mother who loved them, someone with a family, someone who'd been trying to speak as they died, trying to ask why. I cried until I had nothing left. Then I laid down on the bed, fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because the next thing I remember was Sarah shaking me awake. It was dark outside. I'd slept for 8 hours. "You okay?" she asked. "You've been asleep all day. Are you getting sick?" "Just tired," I lied. "Rough hike. I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. I would never be fine again. That night I lay awake until 2:30 a.m. That's when I heard them for the first time. The footsteps started just after 2:30 a.m. Heavy, deliberate, moving around the perimeter of the house. I got up slowly, careful not to wake Sarah, went to the bedroom window and looked out. The motion sensor lights had clicked on, illuminating the yard in harsh white light. But I couldn't see anything. The footsteps were just beyond the range of the lights, in the shadows at the edge of the forest. But I could see shapes, tall shapes, multiple ones, standing just outside the light, perfectly still. They were watching the house. I counted at least 5 distinct shapes, different heights, a family group. My heart was hammering. Part of me wanted to grab my rifle, go outside, confront them. The other part knew that would be suicide, so I just stood at the window and watched them watch my house. After about 20 minutes they left. I heard the footsteps moving away, fading into the forest. The shapes disappeared. I went back to bed but didn't sleep. Just laid there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for them to come back. They didn't. Not that night, but I knew they would. They'd found where I lived. They knew my house. They knew my truck. They knew everything about me. They came back the next night. Same time, 2:30 a.m., same pattern. Walk around the house, stop at the edge of the light, stand there for 20 minutes, leave. Third night, same thing. I started to understand what was happening. This wasn't random. This was intentional. They were establishing a pattern, making sure I knew they were there, making sure I never felt safe. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence, that I was imagining things, that the stress and guilt were making me paranoid. But the tracks didn't lie. During the day, when Sarah was at work, I'd go outside and examine the ground at the edge of the yard. The tracks were there, massive barefoot prints, easily 18 inches long, 5 toes, human arrangement. Multiple sets of tracks, different sizes. I took pictures, measured them, made casts with plaster of Paris. The evidence was undeniable. Something, multiple somethings, was visiting my house every night, and I knew exactly what they were. I considered calling the police, but what would I tell them? That I was being stalked by Bigfoots? That I'd killed one and now the family was haunting me? They'd think I was insane. Might even commit me for evaluation. I couldn't risk that. I considered telling Sarah, sat her down a dozen times, tried to find the words, but every time I'd imagine her reaction, the disbelief, the fear, the knowledge that her husband had killed an intelligent being and was now being stalked by the family. I couldn't put that on her. So I said nothing. The visits continued. Sometimes nightly, sometimes skipping a night or two. No predictable schedule. That was part of it, I realized. The uncertainty. Never knowing if tonight would be the night they came. After 2 weeks, I was barely sleeping. I'd lie awake until 2:30, listening, for footsteps. If they came, I'd watch from the window. If they didn't, I'd lie awake until dawn anyway, too wired to sleep. I lost 15 pounds in the first month. Sarah noticed, asked if I was okay. I told her I was trying to get in better shape. She believed me because she wanted to. My daughter called from college. We talked for 10 minutes. She asked how the hunting season was going. I told her I hadn't had any luck yet. She said she loved me, was looking forward to coming home for Thanksgiving. I told her I loved her too, and I thought, I killed someone's child. Someone else's daughter won't be coming home for Thanksgiving. Or ever. The guilt was crushing. In November, 6 weeks after the shooting, something changed. I was out in the woods. Had to be. Had a client. A businessman from Seattle who'd paid $3,000 for a deer hunt. I needed the money. Needed to keep pretending everything was normal. We were set up in a different area, about 10 miles from where the shooting had happened. I was scanning the forest with binoculars, looking for deer, when I saw one of them. It was standing in the trees about 100 yards away, just standing there, watching us. I recognized it. One of the juveniles from that day, about 7 feet tall, reddish-brown hair. It was the one who'd wanted to attack me, the one the mother had stopped. It wasn't hiding. It was standing in plain view, making sure I saw it. The client didn't notice. He was focused on glassing the opposite hillside, but I saw. We made eye contact. The creature didn't move, didn't vocalize, just stared. Then it turned and walked away. Slow, deliberate, no hurry. It happened 3 more times that day. Different locations, always staying just out of the client's line of sight, but making sure I saw. They were following me, not just visiting my house, following me into the woods, watching me hunt. The message was clear. We know where you live. We know where you go. You're never alone. I cut the hunt short, told the client I wasn't feeling well, refunded half his money. He was annoyed, but accepted it. On the drive home, I saw one standing by the side of the road, just for a second, in my headlights. Then it was gone. They were everywhere. I started researching, spent hours online, reading everything I could find about Sasquatch, Bigfoot, encounters, sightings. The more I read, the more terrified I became. There were thousands of reports, going back hundreds of years. Native American tribes from all over North America had stories, legends, warnings. The warnings were consistent. Leave them alone. Don't hunt them. Don't hurt them. They remember. One account from a Lummi elder in Washington particularly stuck with me. The forest people have long memories, longer than ours. You harm one of them, they don't forget. They don't forgive. They wait. They watch. They make sure you never forget either. I found reports of people who'd claimed to have shot Sasquatches. Most of them died within a year. Hunting accidents, falls, mysterious disappearances in the woods. The ones who survived? They reported the same thing I was experiencing, being watched, being followed, never feeling alone in the forest again. One report from 1973, a hunter in Northern California who'd shot what he thought was a bear. When he approached, he realized it was a young Sasquatch. The family came. He ran, got away. For the next 30 years, until the day he died, they visited his house. Every week, sometimes more. Never hurt him, never hurt his family. Just watched. The hunter developed severe anxiety, depression, PTSD. He wrote in his journal, found after his death, "I can't make them understand it was an accident. I can't apologize. I can't undo it, so I just have to live with it, with them, until I die." I understood exactly how he felt. 3 months after the shooting in January 2019, they got bolder. I woke up one morning to find tracks in the fresh snow, not at the edge of the yard, on the porch. One of them had walked right up to the front door, stood there. The tracks showed it had been there for several minutes, just standing, facing the door. Sarah saw the tracks. "What the hell made those? Bear?" "Must be," I lied. "Big one. I'll call Fish and Wildlife, see if they can send someone to check it out." I never called. What would be the point? That night, they came earlier, 11:45 p.m. I wasn't asleep yet. I heard them arrive, multiple sets of footsteps. They walked around the house 3 times, slow circles. Then they stopped at various windows. I could hear them breathing, see their shapes through the curtains. They were looking in. One of them was at our bedroom window. I could see the silhouette, massive, tall, head tilted as it looked inside. Sarah was asleep. She didn't wake up. But I saw it, and it saw me looking back. We stared at each other through the glass for a long moment. I couldn't see details in the darkness, just the shape. But I knew which one it was. The mother. She raised one hand slowly, placed it on the window. The palm was huge, fingers spread. She held it there for a few seconds. I knew what it meant. I'm this close. I could come in any time I want. Remember that. Then she pulled her hand away and left. The others followed. In the morning, there was a perfect handprint on the window, huge, human-shaped, unmistakable. I cleaned it off before Sarah could see it. By the time the first anniversary came around, October 15th, 2019, I was a different person. I'd lost 40 pounds, barely sleeping, barely eating. My hair had started going gray. I looked 10 years older than I had a year before. Sarah was worried. She'd begged me to see a doctor. I went, got a full physical. The doctor said I was healthy physically, but showed signs of severe stress and anxiety, prescribed antidepressants. I took them for a week, then stopped. They didn't help. How could they? Pills can't fix what I'd done. My daughter had come home for Christmas, took one look at me, and started crying. "Dad, what's wrong? You look terrible." "Just tired, honey. Getting old." She didn't believe me. She spent the whole visit trying to get me to talk, to open up, but I couldn't. How do you tell your daughter that you murdered someone and the family is slowly destroying you? She went back to school early. I could see the worry in her eyes, the fear that something was seriously wrong with her father. She was right to be afraid. On the anniversary, exactly 1 year to the day after I'd killed the young Sasquatch, they came during daylight. I was in the garage working on my truck. It was about 3 p.m., bright October afternoon. Sarah was at work. I heard footsteps, heavy ones, coming up the driveway. I grabbed a wrench, stupid, useless, but it was all I had, and stepped out of the garage. 5 of them were standing in my driveway, just standing there, 20 feet away. The mother was in the center. The others flanked her. They weren't hiding, weren't trying to be sneaky. They wanted me to see them in full daylight, to see exactly what they looked like. The mother was massive, 9 feet tall, easily 800 pounds, dark brown hair covering most of her body, silver streaks around the face. Her face was deeply lined, ancient. The eyes were dark and intelligent and full of pain. The others were various sizes. I recognized some of them from that day in the clearing. They'd grown in the past year. The youngest was noticeably taller. We stood there, staring at each other. No one moved. No one made a sound. I wanted to say something, wanted to apologize, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but my throat was closed. I couldn't speak. After what felt like forever, the mother tilted her head slightly, studying me. Then she made a soft vocalization, almost like she was speaking to the others. They all looked at me then, really looked, taking in every detail. Then they turned and walked away, down the driveway, onto the road, into the forest. Gone. I stood there shaking. They'd come in daylight, to my house, up my driveway. That was new. That was an escalation. And I realized, this is year 2. They're changing the pattern, keeping me off balance. The second year was worse than the first. They started varying everything. Sometimes they'd visit 3 times in 1 week, then nothing for a month, then every night for 2 weeks straight. Sometimes just one would come, sometimes all of them. Sometimes they'd arrive at 2:30 a.m., sometimes at dawn, sometimes dusk. The unpredictability was torture. I could never relax, never let my guard down. Any time, day or night, they might be there, and they got more creative. I'd find things in the yard, arrangements of rocks or sticks, patterns I'd never seen in nature, messages maybe, or just ways to show they'd been there, that I hadn't noticed their visit. Once I found a deer skull, perfectly placed in the center of my driveway. The neck vertebrae were shattered, snapped by enormous force, a demonstration. Another time, one of them left a handprint on my truck hood. The metal was dented from the pressure of the palm. They were showing me how strong they were, how easily they could hurt me if they wanted. But they never did. Never damaged property beyond these little demonstrations. Never threatened Sarah directly. Never came in the house. They had rules, their own moral code. They were punishing me, but within boundaries. I was losing my mind. Sarah finally insisted I see a therapist. I went to 3 sessions. The therapist diagnosed me with PTSD, severe anxiety, possible paranoid ideation, wanted to increase my medication, maybe add antipsychotics. I stopped going. My business was failing. Word had gotten around that Mike Thornton wasn't reliable anymore. Canceled hunts, cut them short, acted paranoid in the woods. Clients stopped booking. We were surviving on Sarah's income alone. She picked up extra shifts, worked herself to exhaustion, and I knew it was my fault. All of it. Emma called less and less. When we did talk, I could hear the strain in her voice. She was worried about me but didn't know how to help. I was pushing her away, just like I was pushing everyone away. I was isolating, withdrawing, becoming someone I didn't recognize. And through it all, they watched. They waited. They reminded me every week that they hadn't forgotten. In year 3, I started seeing them during the day. Not at my house, in town. I'd be at the grocery store, loading bags into my truck, and I'd catch a glimpse of one standing in the tree line across the parking lot. Just watching. I'd be getting gas, and I'd see one in the forest behind the station, always just at the edge of visibility, always watching. Sarah noticed me staring at the woods more. "What are you looking at?" "Nothing. Thought I saw a deer." But it wasn't deer. It was them. They were following me everywhere, making sure I knew I could never escape, never have a moment where I wasn't being observed. I stopped going into town unless absolutely necessary, started having groceries delivered, avoided going anywhere that wasn't essential. Sarah thought I was becoming agoraphobic. She wasn't wrong. One day, I was in my truck in the driveway, about to leave for a rare hunting client. I looked in the rearview mirror. One of them was standing 20 feet behind the truck, just standing there in broad daylight in my driveway, watching me. I sat there, frozen. We made eye contact in the mirror. After a moment, it stepped aside, clearing the path, permission to leave. I drove away slowly, looked back in the mirror. It was still standing there, watching me go. I canceled the hunt, told the client I was sick, drove home and locked myself in the house. They owned me, completely. Every decision I made was influenced by them. Where I went, when I went, what I did. They controlled my life without ever laying a hand on me. It was perfect revenge. Year 4 was when I started to break. I'd wake up, screaming from nightmares. Always the same dream, the young Sasquatch dying, looking at me, trying to speak. But in the dream, I could understand what it was saying. "Why?" Just that one word, over and over. "Why? Why? Why?" And I'd have no answer. I'd try to explain. "Thought you were an elk, accident, didn't mean to." But in the dream, those excuses sounded hollow, meaningless, because it didn't matter what I'd meant to do. What mattered was what I'd done. I'd killed someone's child. Sarah found me one night, sitting in the dark in the living room, crying. 3 a.m. I hadn't even realized she'd come downstairs. "Mike, please," she begged, "please tell me what's wrong. Let me help you." I wanted to tell her. God, I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't. How could I explain that our lives had been destroyed because I'd made one careless shot, that we were being stalked by a family of cryptids seeking revenge? She'd never believe me. Or worse, she would believe me, and she'd be as terrified as I was. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just work stress. The business isn't doing well." "Then let's sell," she said. "Sell the business, sell the house, move somewhere else. Start over." "We can't," I said automatically. "Why not?" "Because they'd follow me. Because there's no running from this. Because I deserve what's happening to me." But I said, "The market's bad. We'd lose too much money." She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes, but she didn't push, just held my hand in the dark and cried with me. I was destroying her too, just like I was destroying everything else I touched. Year 5, I tried to make contact. I couldn't live like this anymore. The fear, the guilt, the constant surveillance. Something had to change. I went back to the clearing where it had happened. First time since that day. I don't know what I was hoping for. Closure, forgiveness, understanding. I brought offerings, food, fruits, vegetables, nuts, things I'd read that Sasquatches might eat. I laid them out in the clearing, knelt down in the grass, exactly where the young one had died. The bloodstains were still there, faded to brown, barely visible, but there. I could see where it had fallen, where it had bled out. "I'm sorry," I said aloud. My voice sounded strange in the empty forest. "I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. I thought you were an elk. I didn't know." Silence. "I know that doesn't matter. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know. It was an accident, a terrible, inexcusable accident, but not murder, not intentional." More silence. "Please," I said, and my voice broke. "Please, if you can understand me, give me a sign. Let me know. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Anything to make this right." I waited. An hour. 2 hours. The sun moved across the sky. Birds called. Wind moved through the trees. But they didn't come. I went back the next day, and the next. Every day for a week. Left food. Spoke to the empty clearing. Apologized over and over. The food was never touched. No tracks, no signs they'd been there. On the 7th day, I found the food I'd left scattered. Not eaten, just thrown around, torn apart, destroyed. And in the center of the clearing, where the young one had died, was a single rock, placed deliberately, a cairn marker. They'd been there, they'd heard me, and they'd rejected my apology. The message was clear. No forgiveness, no understanding. Just remember what you did. I never went back. Which brings us to now. October 2024. 6 years since that morning. They still come. Not as often anymore, maybe once every week or two, but regularly enough that I never forget they're there. The pattern has settled into a routine. They visit, they watch, they leave. Sometimes they leave signs, tracks, handprints, arrangements of rocks, little reminders. But something changed this year. Last month, on September 15th, exactly 1 month before the anniversary, something happened. I woke up at 2:30 a.m. to the usual sounds. Footsteps outside. I got up, went to the window, expecting to see the same thing I'd seen hundreds of times before. But this time was different. The mother was standing directly under my bedroom window, not at the edge of the light, right there, maybe 15 feet away. She was holding something. It took me a moment to understand what I was seeing. Then my blood froze. It was a deer skull, fresh, still had some tissue on it, and balanced carefully on top of the skull was a rifle cartridge. .30-06 Springfield, my caliber. She raised it up, held it toward my window, making sure I saw, making sure I understood. We made eye contact through the glass, and for the first time in 6 years, I saw something different in her eyes. Not just grief, not just the promise of revenge, satisfaction. She'd been waiting for this. 6 years of stalking me, watching me deteriorate, seeing me destroy my life with guilt and fear. 6 years of psychological torture, and now she was ready for the final message. I know what you do. I know what you use. I could do to you what you did to mine. Any time I want. She held the display for a full minute, making absolutely sure I understood. Then she set it down carefully in the grass, right under my window, and she smiled. I'd never seen one of them smile before. It was horrible, not because it looked threatening, because it looked human, satisfied, almost pleased. Then she turned and walked away. In the morning, the skull and cartridge were gone. No trace. But I knew what I'd seen. I'm writing this down now because I think the end is coming. Yesterday was October 15th, 2024. 6-year anniversary. I had a client, couldn't afford to turn down the work. We were in a different area, but they found us. I heard them calling to each other in the forest, coordinating, following us. The client heard it too, asked what it was. I told him wolves. We saw a bull elk. Nice 6-point. The client wanted to take the shot. As he was setting up, I looked behind us. 3 of them were standing in the trees, maybe 80 yards away, just watching. I could have told the client, could have shown him. Finally had proof, a witness, someone who could verify I wasn't crazy. But I didn't, because I knew why they were there. They were testing me, seeing if I'd learned anything, seeing if I could stand there and watch another hunter take an elk, knowing what I know now. The client took his shot. Clean kill. We field-dressed it, packed it out. Standard hunt. The 3 watched the whole time, making sure I saw them, making sure I understood that they were allowing this to happen. As we loaded the meat in the truck, I looked back one last time. The mother was standing alone at the tree line. We made eye contact across the distance, and I understood. This is the rest of my life. They'll always be there, always watching. I'll never be free of them, never escape what I did, and I deserve it, every second of it. The worst part isn't the stalking, isn't the fear, isn't the constant surveillance. The worst part is that I understand them. If someone killed Emma, accidentally, intentionally, doesn't matter. I'd want revenge. I'd want them to suffer. I'd want them to know every day for the rest of their life what they'd taken from me. I'd do exactly what they're doing. The real horror is that they're completely justified. They're not monsters. I am. I killed a child, someone's daughter, someone's sibling, someone's family member. A thinking, feeling person who was just living their life until I mistook them for game and put a bullet through their heart. And their family has shown remarkable restraint. They could have killed me that first day, could have killed me any night in the past 6 years, could have hurt Sarah or Emma or anyone I care about. But they didn't, because they're better than that. They have rules, moral codes. They punish within boundaries. They're more civilized than most humans I know. So yes, I'll live with this. I'll continue waking up at 2:30 a.m. listening for footsteps. I'll continue seeing them in the forest. I'll continue carrying the guilt of what I did. And when I die, whether that's tomorrow or in 30 years, I'll die knowing that I took a life I had no right to take. They'll probably be at my funeral, standing at the edge of the cemetery, watching, making sure I'm really gone. And I hope they feel some peace then, some satisfaction, some sense that justice was served. It won't bring back their child. Nothing can do that. But maybe it'll be enough. If you've read this far, you're probably wondering if I'm crazy, if this is real, if Sasquatches actually exist. I can't prove it to you. The photos I took never came out right. The casts I made were lost in a move I never made. The tracks wash away in rain. All I have is my word, and 6 years of experiences I'll never forget. But I'll tell you this, if you're out there hunting and you see something that doesn't look quite right, something that makes that little voice in your head say, "Wait, something's wrong here," listen to that voice. Don't take the shot, because you might be aiming at an elk or a deer or someone's child who just wanted to live in peace in the forest they've called home for thousands of years. And if you make the same mistake I made, you'll spend the rest of your life wishing you could take it back, wishing you'd listened, wishing you'd been more careful. But you can't take it back. You can't undo it. You can only live with it, the way I'm living with it, the way I'll always live with it. It's 2:15 a.m. as I finish writing this. Sarah is asleep in the next room. She doesn't know I'm up, doesn't know I'm writing this, doesn't know what's outside. But I know. I can already feel it, the change in the air, The way the night sounds, stop. They're coming. Part of me wants to go outside, face them one last time. Try to communicate something, regret, sorrow, understanding. But I won't, because I'm afraid and because I don't think it would matter. Some wounds can't heal, some losses can't be replaced, some sins can't be forgiven. I hear the footsteps starting, heavy, deliberate, multiple sets. They're here, they're always here, and I deserve every second of it. I killed someone's child, and they'll make sure I never, ever forget. The body of Michael Thornton was found in the woods 3 miles from his home on October 16, 2024. Cause of death was listed as heart attack. He'd apparently gone for an early morning hike and collapsed. No signs of foul play, no wounds, no evidence of animal attack. Just a 54-year-old man whose heart gave out in the forest he'd spent his life in. His wife, Sarah, found this document on his computer. She shared it with me because I'm a researcher who spent 20 years investigating Sasquatch reports. She wanted to know if I thought it was true. I told her I didn't know. I told her Mike had been under a lot of stress. I told her grief and guilt can make people believe things that aren't real. But I didn't tell her about the tracks I found around Mike's body. Barefoot tracks, 18 inches long, 5 toes, human arrangement, multiple sets, different sizes, surrounding where he'd fallen, like they'd gathered around to watch him die, like they'd waited 6 years for this moment. And I didn't tell her about the single item I found placed carefully on Mike's chest, a river stone, smooth, round, placed with obvious intention, a cairn marker, the same kind Mike had described finding in that clearing 6 years ago. I took the stone, took photos of the tracks. Then I cleared the evidence before the authorities arrived. Some things aren't meant to be proven. Some things are better left as stories. But I believe Mike, every word, because I know what's out there in those forests, and I know they remember.